On this edition of the Outdated Wrestling Hour, Cory Sharber, the intrepid reporter for WHYY in Philadelphia. And we'll start off by taking a look back at one of the great villains in wrestling history. No staff announcer this week. We start things off with an important topic on the Outdated Wrestling Hour. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Outdated Wrestling Hour. My name is Bob Smith, and we are so glad to have you back listening to the show. As I sit here now, it's August 9th. It's 6:56 p.m. on a Friday night, and it's been a tumultuous day. This is 1 week before this show airs. I'm recording the show, and it's raining like cats and dogs outside. Where I'm sitting right now, we're getting the remnants of Hurricane Debbie, which has caused a lot of havoc here on the East Coast and all around this area. So I'm sitting here and I hear the rain just booming outside. But it's been raining in our hearts all day today. 1 week ago today, as you listen to this show, Kevin Sullivan died. There's a lot of places you can get a good biography on him. Go to Slam Wrestling. Greg Oliver always does a fantastic job on these things. Read the Wrestling Observer. Go to those places for the meat and potatoes. I just want to talk about Kevin. He was always a major name in wrestling, either behind the scenes or in front of the camera while I was with PWI. I remember he had a stint in Rocky Mountain, of all places, for a little while, where he was really violent there. I remember beating the living bejesus out of a Japanese star who showed up on television to the point where they had to put the big censored mark on because he was jabbing an open wound on the guy's arm with a spike. I think his name was Kanemaru. And he also did a number on Brian Lee with his golden spike there. He was back to being the really vicious Kevin Sullivan. He did that a lot. Everybody remembers his cult in Florida with Mark Lewin and Bob Roop and all those folks and Luna Vachon, and just go down the list. He was real good at that, really creative. Drew big money in Florida against Dusty Rhodes, against Blackjack Mulligan, Barry Windham. Mike Graham was part of that scene. A really high point for Florida wrestling then with Kevin Sullivan there. But I remember him first in the middle to late 70s in the WWF here on the East Coast where I live. And he was a slightly undersized, good guy, fresh-faced, baby face, so to speak. And one thing I remember about him physically, he wasn't the tallest wrestler. Everybody knows that. He didn't need to be. He could get himself over. He had the most powerful legs I've ever seen. Remember that stomp? Well, that wasn't a work. He had incredible leg strength for a gentleman his size. He got over as a face here. I remember him teaming with Andre the Giant a couple of times, and he was, how they did it with newcomers back then. Though you'd win some, you'd lose some, and then he moved on to other territories and did much better for himself. I remember he got a real muscle bodybuilder's physique for a while, but then came the Florida run. But he worked in every territory. People remember him late in WCW with the Dungeon of Doom and Varsity Club and everything else that he did. But I was lucky enough to get to meet him on several occasions with WCW. And I remember sat with him and we were talking, but we were talking about baseball. We ended up talking about just baseball, MLB, and he knew as much about that as he knew about wrestling, that's for sure. But those who worked with him knew that he was a creative genius. He could book, he could lead young wrestlers into new guises, so to speak. And from what I understand, from all accounts, he was a really nice fellow. And this one hits me. This was my era. These are my people. These are my stars. And every time we lose one of this magnitude, it's a kind of a crushing blow. So I know this is an upbeat podcast ostensibly all the time, but I have to give my best wishes to the family of Kevin Sullivan and everybody who knows him. It's a week later, but this is the best I got. I can't do it any earlier than this. They say he was a little undersized, but to me, he was a giant. It's part of what made wrestling from the 70s. Well, through last Friday, there weren't many like him. I don't know what to say. I know he scared a lot of kids. I know he did a lot of great brawling. You know what? Let's just say he made everything better. Wherever he went, he made it better. And that's why he worked for so many organizations and for so long. Here's to you, Kevin Sullivan. Thank you. All right. Well, let's get back. We have a really great guest today. His name is Cory Sharber, and he's from Philadelphia, and he works for the NPR-affiliated WHYY radio station there, and he's a general assignment reporter. And I met him when I did a stint in Philadelphia the Friday before WrestleMania. I was there, and I talked about the upcoming WrestleMania show on their Studio 2 program, which you can still hear as a podcast. Just scroll back, and you'll see it listed there. WHYY.org. And as I'm talking in the room before we went into the studio, I met Cory, and he knew everything I knew about wrestling. He's a really bright 27-year-old guy. He's very, very intelligent, and he really loves wrestling. So I said, come on the show. Let's talk about wrestling. Let's talk about, and we're going to make a statement that you may or may not agree with. It'll be coming up. I don't want to telegraph it, but we're going to talk about a certain city and see if it really qualifies today as the wrestling capital of the United States, because I think it does. So we're going to take a short commercial break, and we'll be right back with Cory Sharber. And don't you go anywhere, because, this gentleman's a lot of fun. He's nothing but energy, and I know you're going to enjoy hearing his words. We will be right back.
This is Joe Walsh. One thing I do when I'm not playing rock and roll is get on the air as an amateur radio operator. Also called ham radio, is a communication service provided by ordinary people just like you and me. We have a national emergency communication system in place 24/7, 365. Find out more about amateur radio at arrl.org/What is ham radio? See you on the air.
Okay, kids, as I talked about in the opening, back at WrestleMania time, I went to Philadelphia, and out of the blue, I got contacted by an NPR-affiliated radio station called WHYY in Philadelphia. And they wanted me to come on a show to talk about, WrestleMania. And I was like, well, am I going to go? I got work to do. I work full time. And somebody said to me, you got to go. It's NPR. And I said, you make a good point. So I took the day off, jumped on Amtrak like anybody else would, and got into Philly and had a wonderful time. And one of the best things that I had been meeting all those great people. And by the way, the nicest radio station I've ever been in. I've been in a lot of radio stations. The grand piano and the foyer, please. That's too good. but anyway, I met a young man who I started to talk to before the show, and I was so impressed by his wrestling knowledge. I was like, wow, this kid knows his stuff. And as it turns out, he was the other fellow on the show who was a guest along with me. So I want to welcome Cory Sharber here. He's general assignment reporter and a whole lot more for WHYY in Philadelphia. Cory, thanks for coming.
Hey,
good to see you again, man.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, it was nuts because it was when they asked me to go on Studio 2 with you. I was just like, who am I going on the show with? And they were like, oh yeah, this guy used to work for this thing called like PWI or whatever, or like Wrestling, Observer, whatever. Like they didn't really know. They didn't doing this for a long time. And I was like, oh, I think we'll be fine. Like I was just like, oh, this guy knows his stuff. Mm-hmm. I claim to know my stuff. I grew up more in like the ruthless aggression era and all that stuff. But yeah, it's nuts. It's kind of funny how like that was for me being like a reporter. My dream was I never would have thought in a million years that I'd be in the same town as WrestleMania and getting to cover all the craziness that goes with WrestleMania week. So yeah, it was a happenstance moment. to meet you. And I mean, yeah, I'm really stoked to have more conversations with you about all this goofy stuff we like.
Well, thanks. But you know what's amazing about my appearance there? They booked me based on the podcast, and I had no idea I was the managing editor of Pro Wrestling Illustrated all those years ago. So on the way in, I noted, they wrote down, they gave me some notes, and I said, you should really add, it adds credibility if you tell, the people who are listening, that was what led to the podcast, was my stint in wrestling magazines all those years ago. And they went, oh, yeah, that's great. So they rewrote my intro when we did the show. But if I hadn't told them that, it still wouldn't have been mentioned that was with PWI. I just had a podcast,
I mean, it's kind of, the when you go on to kind of a more like Studio 2 is a more, it's like a general kind of like, I don't want to say magazine, but it's, your at noon talk show that goes over so many different things. And then when you have to get into the niche world of pro wrestling, there's just so many layers. I mean, it's just like one big stinking onion. You just keep peeling and peeling. You'll just find all these different magazines, different podcasts. This guy had a stint in pro wrestling for a year, is now like a famous actor, all this stuff. And it's really funny how much like you can just with just like what our niche interest is, how much material there really is there.
Yeah, it's something else. But anyway, I had a blast. I really did. Just going around Philly. Like I said, I was with ECW and Todd Gordon all those years ago.
Yeah.
And to be able to walk those same streets I used to walk and go back to, go back to the center city and everything like that. I just had a wonderful time when I was there. And the problem was I had to get back. I had to leave. I had to leave town at about, I guess, 4 in the afternoon or so.
Yeah.
And I wanted to stay because there were a lot of events going on. The Blue Meanie was at a bar there and everything. And I was invited to, and I said I was going to try to make it, but things get hairy. I could barely make it in and back as it was. But as it were, I was bopping around Philly and looking around, and it was really early in the day, when that show was on, and WrestleMania wasn't until the weekend. And I'm looking around town and I'm like, look at this place. There are banners with wrestlers on them all over the town, and people in their favorite wrestlers' T-shirts. And this was like 2 days before the event. And then there were some local cards at the 2300 and other places. Yeah. I was like, I'm in wrestling heaven here. This is it.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of incredible because it was WWE. It was the first time they've ever done like a World at WrestleMania thing where like they had the convention center for like the whole week and had like all these like old like props and set things that they pulled out of the I want to say Titan Tower, but they don't use Titan Tower anymore. But like it was nuts. I mean, I unfortunately couldn't go to WrestleMania just because economy, and also I tried to get a press pass, but I guess they were too scared of our Murrow Award winners or something, so they didn't let me in. But I mean, it was like even like the smaller shows had like names on them that like I remember like from my childhood. I mean, people who are prominent wrestlers today. I mean, it was insane how much this city, not just the city, but the whole metro area was just packed out with pro wrestling. Given, of course, like you mentioned like ECW. I mean, this is like Philadelphia's legacy to the pro wrestling world will always be ECW and what that company brought to pro wrestling. And but then of course all of the great wrestlers who have emerged from here from all the different wrestling schools in the area. WrestleMania, when they go to all these other cities, I wonder how the experience will compare to Philly, because Philly had, I mean, that WrestleMania will probably go down as one of the greatest of all time. Good luck to the Fed. Let's see what happens.
But we'll stay on point then. We're gonna discuss this near the end of our conversation. But let's stick with it. I propose to you, and I'm not doing this out of favoritism or with the fact that I was part of ECW or any of that other stuff. But I think as we sit here right now, going through the history of the last 30 years in professional wrestling or so, I do believe Philadelphia may be the wrestling capital of the United States right now as we sit here. And I'll tell you why, and I'll go by my reasoning for this. First of all, the ECW connection, it's so fondly remembered by so many people. But even if you go before ECW and before Tri-State Wrestling, in the old days when I was with the magazines in the early 90s, it was one of the few organizations that could promote NWA and WWF at the same time. In other words, they both came to town, whereas, in most territories, it would be, this is our territory and you guys are over there. Even in that era, it was still like that.
Yeah.
But not in Philadelphia. Philadelphia had those people coming in, as well as some indies at the time. But, you know, you look at that arena, the 2,300 arena, and I just counted, I researched it a little bit. There's been like a dozen promotions that are promoted in there, you know,
Right.
and including during the weekend when we were there, you know, when I was there. So, including New Japan did some stuff at the ECW arena. So, all I know is the loyalty of the fans, the fact that people around the East Coast, I know, traveled to get to Philadelphia for all these events. I can't tell you the number of bus trips from New York that used to go back and forth for big events and ECW events. There were so many New Yorkers in ECW crowds, it was crazy.
Yeah.
And people from Maine. You know, Todd Gordon told me people used to bus down from Maine and up from Tennessee. You said you'd make a weekend out of it, you know?
Yeah.
So I can't think of another city that's this wrestling centric where the fans are more loyal than Philadelphia. You know, for anybody listening out there who doesn't agree, let me know what you think. But for right now, I can't think of a hotter wrestling town than Philadelphia. What do you think?
Yeah, I can't disagree with you at all. I mean, and sorry, I was cutting you off a little bit earlier. I'm just like, wait, you know, I'm a nerd. I'm too excited to be talking about pro wrestling. But it's, I mean, I'm originally from Hopkinsville, Kentucky, and my first exposure and knowledge of Philadelphia was through pro wrestling. You know, growing up, you know, getting online and like learning about like ECW, and of course seeing like when the WWE would have like shows, like SmackDown shows and stuff on TV in Philadelphia. And it was always interesting because the crowds at those shows were always so intense and so crazy, just going nuts and like making sure that the crowd is part of the show, which I think is kind of you know, I think that's kind of one of the, I think, you know, of course we love pro wrestling for so many reasons, but I think it's that element of pro wrestling, the performers interacting with the crowd and vice versa, I think is just what makes pro wrestling so much different from any other art form in the world. But when it comes to with Philadelphia and its influence on the wrestling world, like you were saying, like, you know, back in the day, it was like the one territory where the NWA and WWF could both book shows.
Mm-hmm.
It's still like that today. I mean, the NWA is having a show at the end of this month at the 20th Arena.
I saw that. Yeah,
WWE is coming back to Wells Fargo this year after having like the, you know, insane lineup of shows they had for WrestleMania week, WrestleMania weekend rather. And with the 2300 Arena, you know, as legendary as that venue is, I mean, you know, I've seen TNA there. I've seen New Japan Pro Wrestling there. They still have shows. They have like GCW has shows there. Like all these great brands from all over the world have to come to Philadelphia. I can't think of another city in the world where every single company has to have a presence here at some point. And that, of course, is given credit to like the incredible fan base this city has, but also so many of the great performers that have emerged from the Philadelphia wrestling scene. I mean, it's like, I mean, think of all the people. I mean, just recently, I mean, Damian Priest, he graduated from the Monster Factory, which is in New Jersey, not too far away from Philadelphia. And he was the world heavyweight champion not that long ago. And it's like, you have like all these, like, that's just one guy. I mean, think of all the other people that have emerged from this scene. And WrestleMania, when WrestleMania came to town, I think that really like proved your point at this being the wrestling capital world. I can't think of too many other places in the world that could do something like this, where you just have shows in every conceivable place imaginable. I mean, they were having shows at breweries, like intense outside, like pouring rain. Didn't matter. Hundreds of people still showed up.
This is what I'm saying. Yeah, it's like it wasn't just WrestleMania. Anything wrestling related while I was there was going on like gangbusters, including a convention in a hotel too. I neglected to mention that. Major stars were at a convention, and that was drawing thousands of people. So it's like, I never saw anything like it in my life. I'll tell you right now, that week was something else.
Yeah, and some of the wrestlers I got the chance to talk to and interact with, I mean, they were like connecting with like all their old wrestling friends throughout the whole week at all the different shows and at the conventions and things like that. It was kind of cool to see like the whole wrestling world really like reconvene for like a whole week. And for some people, it's probably longer than that because, there's a lot of folks, like you're in New York, so there's people who coming from New York all the time. There's people in some of the other neighboring states that were, you're more regularly around here. But it was really cool to see people like, they hadn't seen each other in years and they just happened to be working the same show, or they happen to bump into each other at a convention. It was like really incredible to see just so many people, fan wise and performer wise, all connect just for this very special occasion.
So let's. So we were in agreement. I want our listeners to chime in. If you disagree with this, I'd like to know why, and just write to me, and I'll read it on the air like I do a lot here. But let's talk about you for a second. You know so much about wrestling. You knocked me out even before we entered the studio that day. We were talking about wrestling before we took our seats, and I was like, "Boy, this kid knows his stuff." So I wanted to know more about you. How'd you get started? Well, first of all, how long have you been watching wrestling, and how much are you still into it?
Man, I mean, that's the thing. Yeah, I've been watching wrestling. Well, I've been aware of wrestling ever since I was like 3 or 4 years old because I would go over to my brother's house and he was really big into wrestling, towards the tail end of the Attitude Era. He had the WWF SmackDown and SmackDown Know Your Role video games, and we used to play those all the time. You also had the WCW Mayhem video game, which was not good, but I still remember it, and I still had fun trying to figure out how to jump off the damn turnbuckle. But I didn't really start watching wrestling by myself until I was 6, which it was weird. I just remember like being bored. I was in my mom's room. I was just flipping through the channels, and then I found channel 13, which where I'm from happened to be the UPN station, and SmackDown was on. And I think it was like there was some weird like random like 10-man battle royal. I don't remember too much. I remember John Cena was in it. I knew who John Cena was. A rapping pro wrestler. Well, you're automatically my favorite pro wrestler. Like and then when I realized, oh, this comes on at this time. Oh, like it's on this channel. Oh, I'm just gonna watch this every Thursday. And then I realized, oh, Raw's on Monday every Monday at this time. And I just would just keep doing it. I did that. Gosh, I mean, I used to watch wrestling literally every time it was on. And then when you realize, oh, like, okay, Raw's on Monday, SmackDown's on Thursday, and then it was also on Friday, and it was also on Tuesday because they couldn't make up their freaking minds at the studios. Then Velocity's on Saturday, Sunday Night Heat, that's on, and then 2005 TNA popped up on Spike TV. And so all of a sudden it went from, and then of course they brought ECW back, which if you wanted to discuss that, we can, but I don't know if we should discuss that. But back.
I'm with you. I know what you mean. You don't have to say anything. I know what you mean. My favorite thing about the revival of ECW was Tiffany, which has nothing to do with ECW. So, Taryn Terrell. So it's like that was the only enjoyment I got out of that show, the entire run of the thing. And my friend Joey Styles was the announcer there.
Yeah.
They brought him back. That was cool too, to hear him again.
Yeah.
But it just wasn't ECW anymore. It's like when a classic rock band replaces the singer. It's still the band, but it ain't the same.
Yeah, I remember as a kid watching it, and it was like when it first came back, and there was like a match in a disqualification, and I was like 9, and I was just like, that's not supposed to happen. But I was still like, I was just glad that there was more wrestling on TV. Like, I watched wrestling for the longest time, like just all the time, and then the PG era and the WWE started to take course, and that's when I lost a lot of interest. I stopped watching for a while when I was pretty much all throughout middle school. I stopped watching that, but YouTube emerged, and we got high-speed internet at the house, and I would still just like look up things all the time, and like always like reading about like all the crazy things happening in wrestling outside of the WWE. Like that's when I found out about, I wasn't a crazy big watcher, but I heard about Ring of Honor and like all the crazy stuff they were doing there, all the great, stars that were coming out of that. That's how the WWE found, CM Punk, goodness gracious, trying to make sure I get his name right, Bryan Danielson. Seth Rollins is where he started at. And it was like, oh wow, there's this other company that has all these great performers as well. And it was always like nuts to see like growing up, like where you have like, obviously the WWE is on TV every week, like that's a given. But when you go online, there's all these other companies all over the place and wrestlers of all different types of styles. And I started getting slowly back into wrestling towards my later years in high school. And I guess my family always thought I would grow out of pro wrestling. And unfortunately for them, I'm still a big pro wrestling fan all these years later. Now I don't watch pro wrestling live all that much because of social media. You can just get everything. They're going to just post the results and all the highlights anyway on Instagram or Twitter or whatever. So I don't really watch live as much as I used to. I prefer watching in person if I get the opportunity. But I still keep up to date with all the different stuff going on because now, I mean, it's like growing up, like, it was great. WWE was on like all these different days of the week, and then TNA emerged. But now it's like you have WWE's on, AEW is on multiple times a week. If you have the streaming package or the ultra amazing cable package, you have TNA wrestling back. It's nuts. And you also get New Japan. I mean, if you have access, I mean, it's nuts. You can literally watch wrestling every day of the week now. I mean,
Yeah.
I wish it was like that back in the day, like 2000, 2010. But like, it's just crazy, like, to see that, pro wrestling, while it may not, I don't know. I mean, I feel like pro wrestling is kind of having it's entering the realm of pop culture again, and it's really amazing to see it. It's like this thing that growing up, you're like a super total nerd if you're watching this during my adolescence at least, and now it's like you got people like Snoop Dogg regularly appearing in WWE. You got like freaking Logan Paul, who is this famous influencer who's having it pisses me off how amazing of a pro wrestler he is, because
exactly. He shouldn't be as good as he is. You're right.
Right, and it's like, in Bad Bunny of all people was having he helped sell out an arena in Puerto Rico, which is nuts. I mean,
it is crazy.
It's great seeing this weird thing we love just becoming like cool again. I mean, seeing people wear Bullet Club shirts and NWO shirts randomly, it's nuts.
It is. It's crazy. I see 20-year-old college kids and females to boot wearing NWO shirts. I'm like, what's going on? It's like, how? What? Yeah. How do you have that point of reference? But there they are.
And like when I was in college, like when the Bullet Club really started emerging with their presence in New Japan and Ring of Honor, and just casually seeing Bullet Club shirts like out and about, I was just like, is pro wrestling cool again? Because I would wear pro wrestling shirts and people be like, what's this like stupid New Day Booty-O shirt or whatever you're wearing? Whereas like the Bullet Club shirt was like this iconic fashion item for a little bit. It was so fascinating, and it's cool to see like that energy is somehow carried forward.
You're saying, is wrestling cool again? And I'm thinking about it as you're talking, and my response to that is yes, it's cool, and no, it's not.
Yeah,
it's its own animal. It always has been, even in my day when I was a kid. When I was a kid, wrestling was not cool at all. And I'm talking the 70s. Wrestling was not cool at all. It was considered grungy and low rent, and it was like dingy arenas and in many cities, and it was bloody magazine covers, and the whole vibe was different then. No, it was a different thing back then.
Yeah,
and it has evolved. But now I think yes, it's cool, and no, it's not. But that's why they're printing money right now, because I call it the great equalizer. You have show business personalities who want to get into it, and kids turning 13 who are just discovering it at the same time. And for some reason, college kids have never been into wrestling as much as they are right now. There's no question about that in my mind. That's where all the arguments on Facebook are coming from. It's the kids with the long beards. I'm telling you, it's those are the ones who are getting into the WWE versus AEW arguments.
Oh yeah,
you know what I'm saying? There's no old people doing that. That's kids.
I mean, I'm 27 years old, and like anytime I see people, because it's kind of funny because I totally get why people argue for one thing over the other, because that's how capitalism and marketing works. You have to have rivalries in order to drive attention. And that's why so many things you see, I believe, are just so manufactured. But it always kind of disappoints me when I see those things pop up. I get why they happen, But I'm just stoked that we have two major wrestling companies in the United States right now that both have very serious backing behind them. And I've gone to multiple WWE shows, TV tapings. I've gone to multiple AEW shows. I covered a Ring of Honor show recently. I mean, I'm just glad that we have like wrestling in these big venues that so many people can participate in. But most importantly, if you don't like what one company's doing, there's another one that you can watch very easily at any time. If you think the talent in this company sucks, well, you might like the talent in this company. And most importantly, wrestlers have more opportunities to work. They have more opportunities to showcase their talents to people who may not have seen them before. And we're seeing that right now with WWE and AEW. There's so many great wrestlers that, I mean, and I'm not like trying to like dismiss like hardcore fans that may be listening to this. I'm kind of speaking, I guess, in a more like casual tone here. How many people knew about MJF before AEW? And we've seen this guy have the most miraculous rise to the top of pro wrestling.
I'm from the Long Island area where he's from.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
And he was in creative pro wrestling, I think 18 months before he broke on AEW.
Yeah.
And that's a rise right there. We all knew around here that he had the gift. He just had that odd charisma that you can't define, but you know it when you see it. You know what I mean? It's like what Roddy Piper had and other people like that.
Yeah.
Like Roddy was never the biggest guy or the strongest guy, but he got over on cult of personality. You know, he could communicate in a unique way, and that's important in wrestling.
Right. I mean, and it's like, we all, a lot of, watching WWE, especially, when in the Vince McMahon era, which is like a weird thing to say now, because you just thought that guy was going to take the Fed to the grave with him. But, it was a guy like MJF would just never get the chance to shine in the WWE under his watch. And when AEW came out, it was, for a lot of us was, I guess the hope for a lot of us, it was the antithesis of what the WWE was. It definitely caters more towards like the Ring of Honor, New Japan fandom. I was more, which I'm not against those wrestling styles at all. I mean, they definitely there's so many great talents that have emerged from those companies that deserve to have the platforms they do, in my opinion. But there's so many great wrestlers we've gotten to witness as a result of AEW emerging. I think a lot of people, like I mentioned, MJF is out there. I mean, he is probably the best promo cutter we've seen. Gosh, I mean, I don't want to give him too much credit. I mean, but we're talking about people like, of course, in my era, John Cena. Even though we all got sick of seeing, the bright color T-shirt good guy after a while, he was always a very solid promo cutter. Of course, folks like Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock. And then, of course, you mentioned Roddy Piper. I mean, like, MJF is that good of a promo cutter. And then when you put him in a match, he can work a great match. And it's incredible to see like the rise of someone like that. But I mean, there's also so many other talents that have emerged from AEW or people who may have not gotten a fair enough shake in the Fed that were able to cross over, like Swerve Strickland, who, I mean, I heard about him, like he was doing, I don't want to say working the territories, but he was working indie dates at
no, it's okay. I like the, hey, listen, you're making me feel young when you say working the territories, Well, yeah, those were my day, the territories, buddy.
He was working on some indie shows, some indie companies in Tennessee. That's how I first heard about him. And then when he signed to NXT, I was like, finally, this really awesome dude is going to get his big break. And to be fair, he had great success there. But when he came over to AEW, it was like, oh, they're actually going to back him. And then when we saw that organic rise he had with the audience, and the audience wanted him to succeed as well, it's put him in this great position where now he's carrying the big belt for him. And it's like nuts. Like, I mean, it's great seeing like now that, because I know I've been going on a tangent too long about this, but it's great just knowing there's another major company that will give more people opportunities to try something new, build themselves up, because they may have not gotten a fair shake at other places. But most importantly, now we just have access to witnessing all this great talent. And at the end of the day, I think all of us can agree that we just want to see great wrestling. And now that there's more companies out and about, that's more wrestling for us to watch, which I think is great.
Now, listen, I have nothing against the people at AEW. I am not that kind of a person. However, I do think that their match psychology needs a little tweaking. That's just me.
No,
In terms of the matches are too long, there's too many pinfall attempts, and there's too much high risk that doesn't need to be inserted. If you're doing a high risk maneuver and it doesn't result in a pinfall, why did you do it?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? It kind of makes it kind of corny.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting because like I've heard some people kind of refer to this style of wrestling as like Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat wrestling, where it's just like you just how many Hadoukens can you really throw at the guy before the health bar finally depletes, and it's interesting because I felt like growing up like with like the ruthless aggression era and like the prime of like TNA and like the mid 2000s, like what I got to watch on TV every week, that style was slowly emerging, especially with the cruiserweight division and in the WWE and the X division in TNA, where it's like, all right, you guys have to get all your stuff in 10 minutes. So they would just go balls to the wall for like those awesome 10-minute matches. It was literally like watching like superheroes like flying all over the ring and whatnot. But it's interesting because that became such a sought after like form of pro wrestling, especially with like PWG with its influence, which of course they have so many wrestlers in PWG and AEW. There's a lot of crossover there. Style is also very influenced by what we see with strong style wrestling, New Japan, and things like that. It's kind of
You're making a point though, and I'm just gonna bring this up, and I'm not criticizing anybody. Trust me, but it used to be that the indies took their cues from the majors. Now the majors are taking their cues from the indies. It don't work that way. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
If the indie styles were so good, people would go see them. I rest my case.
It's funny you mentioned that because I wasn't really following NXT until this year. They happened to have a show in Clarksville, Tennessee, of all places, which I grew up like 30 minutes away from. So when I got word about that, I immediately told my friend, like, I'm buying tickets. We're going to this show. And it was incredible, but it was nuts because like NXT is essentially kind of like, for the longest time has been like the WWE basically like booking what their version of like Ring of Honor would be like, or what their version of New Japan would be like. And like to go and witness that in person with that crazy audience that was there, it was like a sold out crowd of like 6, 7, 8,000 people. I don't remember. And it was like they were having these crazy like off the wall matches. And I was just like, this is a WWE show. Like, this is nuts. Like, growing up, I never would have thought the WWE would be putting on matches like what I witnessed tonight, which are all great, by the way. But it's like kind of nuts to see like the style changing across the board. And like you mentioned, like how, yeah, like it's nuts that these major companies are taking cues from the indies. And it's like, it's just kind of nuts. Does that mean wrestling is becoming more universal across the board, or are people?
No, it just means one company lets the wrestlers do whatever they want to do, basically.
Oh, well, okay, go ahead.
They're letting them. No. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just knowing what I observe, and what I'm observing is when AEW started, they allowed wrestlers in from the indies that they thought had talent, so they welcomed them to the fold, and they brought those characters and their styles in with no booker changing it at all. Mm-hmm. It was the same thing you would have seen in a high school gym in front of 45 people, but now it's on TNT. I think that's a problem. All right. I think talent needs to be honed and shined. And that's why guys like Steve Karen and Al Snow and guys who were behind the scenes, Danny Davis, it used to be, the old timers that would kind of teach them to round their edges off a little bit before they got in front of a bunch of people. I think that's vital. I don't know if the AEW kids are getting that.
And it's a shame because I felt like they had that for a little while when they had AEW Dark and AEW Dark Elevation, which they since canceled because that was sort of where I don't want to say lower card talent, but it was really more of like the younger new talent that were able to kind of come in and work in front of a crowd, work a TV taping, and really like get their craft refined. And this is coming from, I want to note, this is also coming from a person who's never taken a bump, never been into pro wrestling. Do not take like I'm not a brilliant mind of the business, so please take everything I say with a grain of salt. But it's like AEW, I think that's the one thing I wish AEW would do is, you need to get these wrestlers. I don't say you don't need to get these. I don't want to say training, but you need to develop the AEW style, and they have so many great minds in that company. Goodness gracious, like Bryan Danielson's in your company, like one of the greatest wrestlers of all time, in my opinion, and many other opinions. That guy right there should be literally like, hey, here's 20 wrestlers, hand them off to Daniel, like buy a barn somewhere and like, I don't know, like somewhere in Florida, and start training these kids and really getting them. And I say kids, like the same age as me, but it's like, really refine their styles. I think that's why, I think, what we're seeing with the WWE Performance Center, I think that, I think a lot of us, I guess, I know I was kind of worried because it's like, why are you putting a person like, Shinsuke Nakamura in the Performance Center? This guy is one of the best wrestlers ever. Like, he doesn't need any training, but you need him to sort of cater his style to the WWE style. So you have a better mesh of the performance in the ring, because the WWE has their own signature style. And that's their bread and butter, even though for a long time, that's why I stopped watching it, because they needed to change it up a bit. But like you have like NXT and the Performance Center there, which really helps like develop their style more. Get all these people ready for the big shows, the pay-per-views, Monday Night Raw, and all of that. And that's the one thing I wish AEW had. They have Ring of Honor, to be fair, but Ring of Honor is really more of its own company. It's really more of its own show. It's not developmental. It's not really, used in that way to kind of like cater all the talent. It's kind of weird, their use of Ring of Honor. I really hope AEW finds a way to kind of make Ring of Honor more of its NXT type of thing. And I really hope they get their own sort of facility to better round out some of these wrestlers. And trying to end this tangent as quickly as I can, a guy like Hook is, I was shocked like how over Hook was when he first started. Of course, being the son of Taz, he has this really awesome, like crazy style of wrestling. It's very hard hitting, brash, but he's just like this skinny, like looking punk from New York. It works so well for me. It's very unbelievable to a lot of other folks. And that is, I totally get it. Like beating a guy like Brian Cage, I totally get why that makes no sense. But they're at this weird point now where it's like, he's good. He's got the it factor. He's got this, but there's something, he needs a little bit more TLC. And AEW, if they had a facility like the Performance Center, would greatly aid a guy like Hook. But without something like that, it's going to be, I feel like it will be tough for AEW to really get their style really get their style together and create more of like a
professional narrative flow, perhaps. It's like a lot of things have to do with pacing, and a lot of things have to do with timing in terms of when you put your talent together in the same ring.
Right.
It seems like they'll start a program, and then the next week on TV, you see one of the participants in that program taking on somebody else. Like, what happened last week?
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? It's like they do that a lot.
And they had that issue with the rankings they had too, because I thought it was awesome. Like, oh, you actually have like a ranking based on like your win-loss record in the company. Mm-hmm. And then it was just like, okay, well, why is this guy fighting for the title? He's not a number one. He's not even ranked. He's getting a title shot or something like that. And
it just appears. It's like there's no logic to it.
And it's like, and it's weird because it's funny because it's like, and I hope this doesn't come off as like a we hate AEW podcast.
No.
I'm so happy AEW exists. I mean, I'm stoked that there's a new major company. Competition only makes pro wrestling better for everyone, if you ask me. But there's a lot of, with it being so new too. I mean, like what it's doing now is incredible. I think that has to be noted. But it's like, there's just some things where I'm just like, they need it's weird I'm saying this, they need extra hands, they need some more cooks in the kitchen to really like balance out this thing.
Yeah.
And like a show like Dynamite, a show like Rampage, and a show like Collision should all have their own distinct identities. They should have like, this is the show, this is your old school wrestling show. This is the night for the high flyers. This is the night for, like this is our cream of the crop pro wrestlers. And they don't really have that.
Well, and back a couple of years ago, I don't know why they bought Ring of Honor and didn't give them one of those spots. You own Ring of Honor. That would have been the different flavor in the company.
Right.
Instead of having 3 shows, give one of them to Ring of Honor. I don't understand why they didn't do that.
What I really honestly like, what I really hope is because Ring of Honor does have its own streaming platform.
Right.
But again, it's like, how many streaming platforms can one person have? This is why I don't have any streaming subscriptions at the moment. But it's like my dream, I guess, for this company would be Dynamite. Obviously, Dynamite is your main show. I would swap out Rampage on Friday and have Ring of Honor on Friday for that 1 hour. Because I think
that's exactly what I would have done. Yeah. With
the performers on that show, I mean, they have so many great wrestlers on Ring of Honor. Of course, a lot of them are Ring of Honor, like legends, really. I mean, I can't remember which Briscoe it is now. I mean, there's the Briscoe brothers and like what they were able to carry on, and unfortunately, one of them passed away, and the brothers now carrying the torch, and we're getting to see him as like a solo performer, and he's been so incredible to watch. I got to watch him win the Ring of Honor World title here in Philly during all of that, and I was just like, this show is so good. It's a shame I have to subscribe to another freaking thing to watch this.
Yeah. And what makes it hard too is that virtually all of the WWE content is pretty inexpensive. I mean, their main shows are, the network, another one's cable, and then Peacock is not expensive. If you wait around for a good deal, you can get it for like $20 a year. Yeah. So it's like that makes it hard for people doing pay-per-views and other things that people have to pay for. Everything sounds expensive other than that.
Right. And what's funny though is that, WWE, I mean, Raw is moving to Netflix. I believe SmackDown will be moving to Netflix in the next year or two. But then NXT is moving to CW. So you'll still have access to watch a WWE product, if you have a TV antenna, which is funny. But it's kind of funny to think that NXT is, in a weird way, it could become more accessible than your 2 flagship shows. I just find that really funny because NXT is not supposed to be the star show, but it's going to be so much easier for anyone to get. It's just so weird. We're kind of witnessing this era of, especially considering AEW's relationship with Warner Brothers Discovery, and every other day we're hearing something terrible about Warner Brothers Discovery. We over-evaluated this whole company by $10 billion. Oh God, I hope this isn't a WCW, AOL Time Warner situation again, where it's oh, sorry guys, you're done. Sorry, bye-bye TV. I hope nothing like that happens. But it's nuts because we're kind of witnessing the media and the technology that exists within it, and the impact that's having on pro wrestling. It's kind of interesting to see what new programs are going to pop up, what new companies we might see popping up on TV, what streaming services we'll have to get in the future. I mean, it's all just so nerdy, and we love it, don't we?
Yeah. Hey, the name of this thing is the Outdated Wrestling Hour. Let me ask you one old school question, which is real simple. You ever watch old stuff?
Yeah, I don't really watch old stuff as much as I watch other people talk about watching old stuff. I think a big thing that's really reignited my love and passion for pro wrestling over the past several years. I watched this great show. It's on YouTube. They have Patreon as well. It's called OSW Review, where they reviewed I want to say they basically reviewed the whole new generation of WWF and the whole Hulkamania era and things like that. And I really kind of just got locked into Ruthless Aggression era stuff because that's just what I grew up with. And then I realized, as I was watching some of these older matches and kind of not studying that style, but kind of observing the difference of what they did then compared to now, I was oh, that's what pro wrestling's about. We have now the the spectacle of pro wrestling, people like jumping off the turnbuckle and, throwing people through tables and throwing chairs in people's faces and things like that. And it used to be like that wasn't really the case. A lot of everything took place in that ring. There's a lot of wrist locks, headlocks, and things like that. But there was a point to it.
Right.
And it's kind of interesting, kind of noting like watching wrestling today, kind of like we mentioned with AEW, there's times where we'll both be watching it, we're just like, gosh, can these guys like slow down for like a couple minutes so I can kind of just digest what's going on? Like, can they like work the joints and things like that like they used to do back in the day? I do, like, as I've gotten older, I really have started to have a lot more appreciation for like a lot of those old school pro wrestlers, especially, the obvious ones, and, Macho Man Randy Savage, who, his promos, that guy will always stand the test of time. He is the perfect, archetype for what a pro wrestler should be. Just great worker in the ring, incredible promo cutter. And then, of course, he also makes your company money because, look at the WWE ads now with Slim Jim. He's in
still
all
on it, right?
He's
Yeah.
in all of them. It's nuts. Guys like that, of course, and like you mentioned, like we mentioned Roddy Piper earlier, who he just being that incredible personality, it made you want to watch him. And when he was a bad guy, you wanted to watch him lose. I think a lot of people, especially these days, we love, like, who doesn't love a good heel? Look at, the WWE these days with people like Dominic Mysterio and Rhea Ripley, and in AEW with MJF. It's like we love watching these bad guys, but we don't love watching them lose, whereas back in the day, the bad guys, you wanted them to lose. And when they won, you just had to keep watching more because you just like, you had to be there for when that guy eventually goes down.
It's funny times we're living in, because I think the good, for what we used to call in the day, good guy, bad guy, I think the whole paradigm is going away. It's who you like.
Right.
Nobody follows the rules, and there are no rules to follow. So I think it's basically fans take to somebody. There's a moment. It's like the old Austin 316 moment. You know what I'm saying? You have that moment where you turn from, hey, this guy's bringing something new to the table, or this woman is doing that too, like Rhea Ripley.
Mm-hmm.
I love her. She looks different. She sounds different. She wrestles different. She's a complete original. I don't know how they eventually came up with her countenance, but boy, does that work like gangbusters. There's never been anyone else like her.
It's nuts. Like, I think that's what's been blowing my mind about pro wrestling over the past 5 years. We're just seeing all these new faces that, like, it's like nuts, because it felt like wrestling for a while. I know when I was a kid growing up, like with the PG era and the WWE, it just felt like wrestling was just the same. It's like, okay, like Batista worked well 6 years ago. Here's our new Batista. Like, okay, like here's, John Cena. He's our superhero baby face. It's like, great, blah blah blah. But it's like, then you had like a guy like Rey Mysterio, who like someone like me, like I love Rey Mysterio growing up, like a dude with all these tattoos and a mask, like jumping all over the place. And then it was kind of like he kind of got pushed aside. It's like, yeah, he wears a cool mask. Yeah, he has a cool t-shirt, or whatever. And it was just like, but we want more of that. Like, what's going on? And now it's like we have like all these different types of folks. You have, I think, I assume you love this team, like FTR.
Oh yeah,
those guys
old school.
I got to see them have a match with the Hardy Boys at a WWE Raw taping. I want to say like 7 years ago. I never really watched a match with them, and I was like, it was easily the best match of the night. And I was like, that's why they're so good, because they are sticking to that old school style. They are mixing some new things up, don't get me wrong. But it was like really refreshing to see that reemergence of that style. And then, of course, I guess to kiss AEW's butt more, you have like all the great luchadors, like blanking on the name now, like Penta Zamiato. I'm completely butchering his name, but like Penta, watching him, like to be fair, he was in Impact Wrestling before, and I believe he won the world title there too. So I did get a little glimpse of him there. But I mean, a guy like that who just, if that guy goes to WWE, I think he's going to be a merch seller for sure, because he's got such incredible. I mean, of course, the cool mask, cool like costume sets and things like that. But when he cuts a promo, you just lock in, and then when you watch him wrestle, you're not changing the channel. I mean, it's nuts to see like people like this like emerging and coming into our view all the time as a result of all this new stuff we get to witness.
As I sit here listening to your words, something popped into my mind. I think that the biggest wrestling stars get that way. It's for three factors. Number one, obvious physical talent. But the second and third factors are this. They're usually assigned some sort of a character.
Mm-hmm.
But when the real person starts to emerge through the character is when they capture the imagination of people. Do you agree with that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I kind of wanted to give a little bit of love to the Ruthless Aggression era, because that's what I grew up with, and that's what made me love pro wrestling. Watching Eddie Guerrero's rise, like he basically got cut from the WWE because of like his personal struggles, and he had to claw his way back. And when he came back with that whole light, cheat, and steel era, it was just so fascinating because you had a guy who really was an underdog. He was, he was smaller than, the big roided out guys of the era. Like, not trying to offend anyone, but I mean, my goodness, what else could you see? I just saw anabolic steroids for like miles with some of these wrestlers, man.
Oh, sure.
And to be fair, he did them too. So, hey, I mean, I'm a little jaded, I guess, in my remarks, but it was like so fascinating to witness, just like this guy, like really like emerge and become like this beloved character. And it's funny because he was essentially playing a bad guy character, but there was always valid reason in it, which was, well, he's smaller than all these guys. He's got to win by any means possible, And it's like, and then I think the other element though into building a star, you have to have a great rivalry, and that rivalry Guerrero had with JBL.
JBL, I was thinking the same thing.
And I remember as a kid, I want to give some credit to JBL too, because I remember OSW Review, one of the guys in that show said when Bradshaw became champion, he quit watching, and I think he missed out on quite a lot, because that guy went from APA. I remember like when the APA split up, and Farouk went one way, and then JBL emerged out of the limousine, and he was this like crass, like like he had this thick Southern accent. He was doing very controversial promos, like literally hunting Mexicans on the border. Like, I don't think you could do that today. But it was just like insane to see like kind of how like real life political elements get mixed into the stories, which of course bit the WWE in the butt the year after with the whole Muhammad Hassan.
Exactly right. I was thinking that too. Yeah.
But what JBL did for that whole year where he was WWE champion, it was they set up this guy who you wanted him to lose so bad. You just wanted him to lose so bad, and of course he broke all of our hearts and got the belt, and Eddie lost, and of course unfortunately lost Eddie not that long after all of that. But then emerged John Cena, who we all got to see him with give an FU to the Big Show at WrestleMania, which was nuts, win his first belt. And then like it was like immediately it was just like, oh, we know this guy's the next big thing. And he got to have these incredible promos with John Bradshaw Layfield, that whole like program they worked, which of course culminated in John Cena's first WWE title win, which who would have thought that guy would have won 16 title belts. But it was like, you need that other element, I guess, to finally make a point here is pro wrestlers, obviously they need to create their own personalities. But when they can connect with the struggles of the everyday man, or the things the everyday man hates. Like, I mean, like, I don't hate millionaires, but like when I saw John Bradshaw Layfield get out of that limousine with his suit and have money falling from the ceiling, I'm just like, God, screw this guy,
Yeah.
A guy like Eddie, who lost everything basically and had to crawl his way back to win the belt. Basically, he had to steal his way to victories. That was always like so captivating. And then we saw John Cena, who, you know, definitely connected with me because growing up I was a huge hip hop fan, and it's like this guy's wearing like Mitchell and Ness jerseys, shout out to Philadelphia, wearing like all these like cool like hats and shoes and stuff, pumping up his Reeboks. It was like, wow, we have like hip hop right represented in pro wrestling, and that connected with me and so many other. I assume connected with a lot of other black kids growing up watching that stuff, and you just have that organic rise. But in order to have that, sure, yes, you need all those three elements like you mentioned, but you have to have a rivalry, and I think that's one thing that it's definitely helped a lot of folks out, like we witnessed with Cody Rhodes at this recent WrestleMania. That's what you need to have these stars really build up. And I think right now we have quite a few rivalries that are doing that and raising a lot of profiles with multiple wrestlers.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Hey, you know what? You know a lot for 27. Let me tell you, your intellect when it comes to pro wrestling is astounding. I discovered that in you the first conversation we ever had, as we waited to go into the WHYY studio. Being that we're a national and worldwide podcast, tell people who you are, what you do, and how they can find you.
Yeah, so my name's Cory Sharber. I am a general assignment reporter at WHYY, which is the NPR news affiliate here in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I'm pretty easy to find. Just type in Sharber tweet or Sharbergram. You'll find me on X, formerly known as Twitter, because why have a good name when you can make it worse, right? And Sharbergram, you can find me on Instagram. You know, I post photos from the stories I cover, photos of the cool concerts I get to go to every now and then, and you will also see some funny little wrestling things from time to time, because I'm just such a big nerd like all of us. And yeah, it's pretty easy. Those are definitely those are the platforms I'm definitely most active on, and yeah, I'm pretty easy to find.
Hey, you're 27. You've gone nationwide, my friend. Not many people can say that, you know, at your age.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I never would have, you know, I didn't realize how small the world was in little Hawkinsville, Kentucky. And once I got out of it, I was like, wow, I didn't realize the buildings get this big. Huh, that's pretty interesting. And I didn't realize, wow, people also drive massive, big Dodge Rams everywhere, too.
Hey, you know, I did the same thing. When I grew up in small, rural Catskill, New York, up in Greene County in the upstate New York area. And I ended up in New York City and within, 30 years of my life. And the juxtaposition was something to get used to. You know, it was like, really, but I took to it. I'm still here.
When you witness, like, there's so many similarities with, small town USA and the big metros. It's really funny to see kind of how, it doesn't really matter where you go here in America. There's a lot of the places end up kind of being the same. It's kind of funny.
I've always said that. I as I travel the country, both as a musician and in my editorial jobs, we're all the same. People are all the same here in America. I really don't get the vibe that people are drastically different in a rural area than they are in a city or in Pennsylvania, or if they are in Florida, or if they're in Arizona. I've gotten all over the country and made friends all over the country, and I think that we all get along better than people want us to get along these days, and I think we should concentrate more on getting along. That's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, I mean, and not to be like, like a 1984, like, heal the world type of figure, but it's like, yeah, if you people would be surprised, whoever they talk to, you'd be surprised how much you have in common with someone else. And I think that's probably what led me to becoming a journalist, is because I was always fascinated by, why do these people think this way and why do these people think another way? And then when you get to talk to people, you'd be surprised at how much people actually agree on at the end of the day.
I'll take you back to 1991, and I went to Memphis, and I went in a van with a bunch of wrestlers, including Jerry Lawler, and I went to what I believe I either went to Mississippi or Arkansas, I can't remember where it was. And I'm standing in the back of the arena, and fans are going, I really like him. He's really great. And I got into conversations with just normal people who bought their tickets, not the guys backstage, but just the fans.
Mm.
And just to see the light in their eyes, the enjoyment they were having.
Yeah.
That's a cool thing. And I thought, these guys are just like my friends that go to ECW and sit in the front row, like Vladimir and all those guys, I knew them back in the day. And it's like, anything that brings that much fun and enjoyment into people's lives can't be a bad thing.
Right. I mean, like when I went to that NXT show in Clarksville, Tennessee, it was like the energy and excitement there was just like when I went to New Japan show at the 2300 Arena last year, or like when I went to, go witness shows at like, goodness, like it didn't really matter what venue it was, like the convention center in Clarksville or like the National Guard Armory in Hopkinsville. There's like this weird energy that wrestling fans have. Like we're all just it's kind of funny. Like when you go to a wrestling show, we're just all happy to be there. It doesn't really matter. We're just all like, oh, there's a cardboard plywood ring in the middle of the venue. Great, we have a reason to be here. Let's have fun and enjoy it.
I saw my first shows at an armory in Albany, New York, and I thought I was in heaven. I thought I was in the big time because I'd seen all the stars on TV right there in front of me, and it's like a magic moment. And another thing I remember how shiny their boots were. You didn't see that on TV. Some of these guys really have shiny, polished boots, and it's like you don't really catch that on television.
My first show, I was really spoiled. I actually saw a WWE Raw house show at Bridgestone Arena in 2007. It was like the day after Christmas, and like it was interesting because I thought like, oh, we're going to go like see Raw, like the fireworks and all that stuff, and it's like, no, but there's a ring in the middle of the arena, and like all the lights are off. But it was funny because like I didn't realize that the WWE didn't just bring their crazy expensive set everywhere, and it was nuts because it was like I got to see like Triple H and Umaga in a steel cage match in the main event, which is like I got to witness those two guys wrestle, let alone in a steel cage match. Like, little gosh, how old was I? I must have been I think I was 11. And I was just like, I think my dad probably regrets buying me that ticket now because I'm never going to stop being a wrestler. That's what I'm here for. But it's like, it was just kind of like, even like without the crazy fireworks spectacle and light show and all of that, wrestling can still be like the most like fun time you can have. And it doesn't matter what day of the week it is. Doesn't really matter what time it is either, as we've seen here in Philadelphia.
I don't care how old or young you are. When you hear your first backdrop of the evening, you go, wow.
Yeah.
I don't care who you are or how many matches you've seen. The first time somebody hits that mat hard and you hear that ringing sound it makes, you go, man, I'm glad to be here. Right? It's like there's something magical about that.
That night in 2007, I remember, like I think it was D.H. Smith. He took I guess he took like took a slam from someone, and it was so, I didn't realize how loud it was in person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, and watching on TV, I was like, man, it just doesn't hit the same. But when you're there, you're like, huh, these guys, like, I hope they have a lot of talent on the back, because this is a rough job.
It is a rough job. And I tell everybody, I have so much respect. There's another thing, the risks that wrestlers take these days. I have so much respect for these men and women, what they have to go through. I knew so many young kids coming up in the early 90s, late 80s. And it was like these guys were living in their cars to go to wrestling school and driving all over the country and making $25 payoff. I'm not even kidding. $25 payoffs.
Yeah.
Anybody who went through that, who stuck with it and made it, God bless them, because that's harder than any other sport I can think of. I mean, baseball, you can get drafted. Football, you can get drafted, things like that. It's not as hard. Here, you have to come from literally nowhere to make a name for yourself in many cases. And I'll tell you what, it's different now. It's kind of an easier path now, but it's still not easy. So I give wrestlers nothing but big props for sticking with it and doing what they do. Again, his name is Cory Sharber. Thanks for being here. And what a pleasure to have you on the show.
Absolutely, my fellow nerd. Thank you so much for having me.
Cory Sharber, thank you, man. Thank you. I was having a rough day. I'm looking at myself here. When we record, you can like see yourself. We use a studio that's online, and we can see each other as we're talking. I'm looking at myself, and I look 17 years older than I am right now. I look like my staff announcer. I look like I haven't slept in 3 days. I don't know what's wrong with me here. My eyes are puffy and everything else. I'm just so I better get out of here. But it was really great to talk to Cory. Really great to make his acquaintance again. And this cat's got it going on, doesn't he? Cory's got it going on. He's something else. So I'm proud to have him here in the Outdated Wrestling Hour. Probably our youngest guest other than Kimmy Sokol so far. We got a lot of cool stuff coming, a lot more people. We have journalists coming on our next show as well. We hope you will be with us for that. This one's a famous guy. You're going to really enjoy meeting the next guest on our show. I'm not going to let the cat out of the bag. You got to see me on social media. You got to see me on Facebook. And I will let the cat out of the bag. We also let you know on X, used to be Twitter, and we let you know on Threads. And that's usually Facebook's my main jam, but I do put announcements on other social media as well. That's all I do. I don't have a dedicated page to this, but you can find me on Facebook. I'm the person singing with BB King. My name's Bob Smith there too. We also have a website, outdatedwrestlinghour.buzzsprout.com, where you can hear every single edition of our show that we've ever done or ever will do. It'll be right on that page. I'm not leaving that company, and we're going to stay right going where we are. No Patreon. You can listen to all of our back shows. No sweat. We're up to about 82, 83 of them now, and we were doing fine. So if you haven't heard the show much, check it out there. You can also write to us at outdatedwrestling@gmail.com. All fan correspondence, please write to outdatedwrestling@gmail.com. Also at outdatedwrestling.buzzsprout.com. There's a blurb there you can see about the Outdated Wrestling Hour fan club. For a nominal fee, and I'm talking just a couple of dollars, you can help perpetuate this show and the Outdated Entertainment Hour, our sister junior podcast. And it just helps. It helps us keep going. We do have regularly scheduled Zoom style meetings where I actually give away a couple of prizes and we talk wrestling. We have a lot of fun. You never know who's going to show up. Like we have one of our guests, Anthony Pyrus, showed up. Liam Savage showed up to one of our more than one of our little tete-a-tates. So check us out at the fan club at outdatedwrestlinghour.buzzsprout.com. That's it for now. We hope you enjoyed this one. We have more fun coming up in the future weeks. I got a lot of cool stuff planned, so stick with us if you would. And you know what I never tell you folks to do? Please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. If you know on Apple Podcasts or any of the others, Spotify, whatever, if you can subscribe, it does help a little bit, and we'd appreciate it if you do that. All you got to do is click the button, and that's it. So until next time, my name is Bob Smith. I used to be with PWI and all those wrestling magazines. I'm glad you followed me here to the Outdated Wrestling Hour. And outdated here means classic, really. It's the classic wrestling hour. You know, we just look back with fondness at the stuff we really enjoyed watching growing up. That's the whole theme of the show, to be honest with you. Let's have a little fun while we're still here, right? Really need to do it. So until next time, I'm Bob Smith. And I always quote my musical idol, Ringo Starr, and say, peace and love, brothers and sisters. And he used to do it with his a V shape with his two fingers in the air. Remember those days? Boy, I do.